is Jean from Happy Indulgence and welcome to my channel. There's been a lot of new subscribers lately and I really appreciate it. Thank you for following me. And remember, if you haven't subscribed yet, the subscribe button's down below. Today I'm going to be doing my June wrap up. During June, it was a super busy month. Now that I look back at it, it sort of went by as a big blur. The biggest thing that happened in June, bookish wise, is probably the Lifeline Book Fest that has just happened. So basically I went there, picked up a whole heap of books, and I'll be doing that in a separate Lifeline Book Fest haul, which should be going up in my channel soon. Other than that, we just had our Name of the Book Club meet in Brisbane and I had a really great time. It was kind of a really chilled out meet this time. We covered Not Your Sidekick, which I'll be talking about a little today. It was a really great diverse book, but yeah, it was kind of shallow as well, so there wasn't too much depth to discuss as part of it. The other big thing that has happened is that my leave has gotten approved for September, so I'll be coming to Europe for 3 weeks. So far, I've been really busy planning for our trip, seeing as it's not far away. I'm thinking of coming to London, Rome, Paris, and Venice. So there's a lot of things that I want to see and do, but I'm trying not to cram too much in as well. So if you have any travel tips for Europe, definitely let me know in the comments down below or message me on any of my social media channels. I'll really love to have a chat with you guys. As always with my wrap-ups, I'm going to go from the books that I love the most to the books that I love the least, and I'll be giving them a star rating and a bit of a short review on my thoughts as well. This month I read 12 books. I was really productive with my reading because I felt like I slacked off a lot with blogging and Instagram and YouTube. So I just sat down and kept on reading, and I managed to get through a lot. Usually I read a lot of audiobooks as well or listen to a lot of audiobooks, but I didn't so much this month. I just got through a lot of really great reads. So the first one is Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. Oh my gosh guys, Uprooted is one of my favorite fantasy books. So Spinning Silver is basically a retelling of Rumpelstiltskin, but it's a huge twist on it. It's told from 6 multiple perspectives. It's basically about a girl who can create gold because she's a tax collector and she takes over her father's job doing that. And then she takes on board a servant while saving her from her abusive father. And then there's also another girl who is a princess from a castle and she has to get married to one of the lords, and she basically doesn't like it because he is possessed by a demon. So as you can tell, it's a really magical fantasy. There's a lot going on here. I had trouble going between the multiple perspectives. I really ended up loving the slow burn fantasy. There was a huge focus on the 2 girls' perspectives and their coming of age and the strength that they offered each other. So one of them is married to a lord who is possessed by a demon, and another one of them is married to a Starrick king who pretty much wants to use her just for her magical powers and creating things into gold. So both of these female characters I found were fantastic. They were feminist, they were strong, but in different ways. The only thing is some of the multiple perspectives I found confusing, and I found like they weren't needed and didn't offer much to the story. So in the end, I really love Spinning Silver. There's just a really magical feeling about it. It's like this cold fantasy world. Maybe it's like a Russian fantasy kind of world. And Naomi Novik writes so beautifully. It's so enchanting. Even though it's a big read, I really ended up enjoying this one and I gave it 4.5 stars. Next book I read is 1,000 Perfect Notes by C.G. Drews. As you guys may know, C.G. Drews is Paper Theory and the blogger behind that blog as well, and she's absolutely amazing. I was really excited about 1,000 Perfect Notes because it's her debut published book. I have known Kate for a long time, since I started blogging in fact, and I've been supporting her writing and blogging journey for a long time, so it's like kind of surreal to have her book finally in my hands and to finally read it. I absolutely love this, guys. You guys know I love my psychological thrillers. I love those reads where you can't expect what is going to happen because of how dark it is. This book is a dark book about domestic abuse, but it's the abuse between a mother and her son. Basically, the mother is a maestro, I don't really know how you say it, but she was a pianist and she's forcing her son to adopt her same hobby. And her son Beck, he has all the typical signs of an abused kid. He's withdrawn, he won't connect to anyone else, he'll do whatever his mum says just to avoid being punished. The abuse here is really dark, it's really brutal, but Kate balances it perfectly with the lighter moments. There's a wonderful sibling relationship, there's a wonderful friendship, and there are puppies and glitter and cakes as well. So it's a very Kate book and you can see her mannerisms coming through her writing, and I really enjoyed this one. In the end, I was trying not to cry because I was in the car about to get off on the way to work, and oh my gosh guys, it is a really touching and really beautiful story, and I can't wait to see what else she comes out with. So I gave 1,000 perfect notes, 4.5 stars. The next one I read is Want by Cindy Pond, and I actually listened to this one on audiobook even though I also own the novel. I really love this, guys. It's totally up my alley because it's set in a futuristic sci-fi Taipei, and it talks about a world where the rich is really segregated from the poor. The rich can basically afford these suits that help them breathe and help them filter out a poison that's slowly leaking into the atmosphere, while the poor people simply have to live with it. They're scraping the barrel for food and they're getting sick and dying pretty much. So you've got this guy and his group of friends called Jason Zhou, and he has a squad that basically wants to infiltrate the corporation that makes these suits and basically bring them down and create equality for all. For those of you guys who are aware of the class struggles between the rich and the poor, it doesn't describe a unique world, but what I really loved about this book was the Asian representation. It just felt so familiar. I love the mannerisms between them. I loved all the Chinese food that you found in here, and I love the technology and youth's obsession with them. I also loved how Jason Zhou got to know the daughter of the corporation's leader called Dai Yu, and they have a really complex and dynamic relationship. I loved hearing about how he was falling for her, even though there were quite a few tropes in here with the whole taking down an evil corporation and falling in love with someone that you shouldn't. I really ended up enjoying this one, so I think I'll give one 4 stars. I'll have a full review up on my blog soon. Next book that I read is From Twinkle with Love by Sandhya Menon. After reading and loving When Dimple Met Rishi last year, between 2 Indian teenagers dealing with an arranged marriage, I was really looking forward to this one. Basically, it's about a girl called Twinkle. It's written in diary format where she addresses the diary to filmmakers that she idolizes, and it's about her coming to terms with wanting to become a filmmaker, but also dealing with her feelings about a crush on a guy, and also she gets a once-in-a-lifetime break for making a film for her school, and there's this guy who wants to help her become the director, and he's a producer, and it's about getting to know him. It's about coming of age and learning that sometimes life doesn't quite take you in the direction that you expect. It's also coming to terms with the truth that isn't always easy to bear as well. And I thought that Twinkle had a lot to learn. In some places she was a bit immature, and the whole time she was grappling with her crush on Neil and his twin brother Sahil, which is an identical twin. She pretty much held her feelings back for Sahil, even though they had so much chemistry and they had similar thoughts on filmmaking, that they had a similar passion, but she has a crush on his popular twin brother simply because she wants to get into his inner circle. And it was just really frustrating having that come up, and that being the conflict of their relationship. But in the end, I think I really thought this was a super cute book. I love the Indian characters, I love the passion of filmmaking, and I love the journey that she had as well. It's also a super cute book, it's a quick read. Sometimes Twinkle has a lot of learning to do, and it just felt realistic because of that. So I ended up giving this one 4 stars. The next book is Only Human by Sylvia Newell, and this is the 3rd and last book in the Themis Files. tales. The first one is Sleeping Giants, the second book is Waking Gods, and this one's Only Human. So this series is best described as an adult Illuminae. So it's basically about giant robots that are on Earth, and there's aliens involved, and it's about the political and wartime machinations around that. So I really enjoyed the first two books. The first one more so than the second one, but Only Human was a really different take on it, which I really enjoyed as well. So obviously things have moved down the track, but what I really like about it is that it was set on an alien planet, and it talks about the political system of this alien planet, of how they treated humans, of what their reasoning is for being on Earth, and the technology and the language that they use as well. So being a sci-fi geek myself, obviously I love that. It was interesting seeing how the humans reacted as well to the aliens and how they made quick friends with them. What's even more interesting is what happens when they come back from this alien world. Obviously that's a life-changing thing, right? So I think I enjoyed this one better than Waking Gods, but Sleeping Giants, which is the first one, I enjoyed a lot more. There are some things, like some persistent things in the series that really annoys me. Like, I'm really annoyed with how it's set in an interview format, so you only hear things after the fact. Because it is set in an interview format between each of the different characters. Some of the characters I felt were larger than life and were a bit over the top and not really believable. So there is an element of disbelief in here as well. And that kind of takes me out of the story because it makes me overthink things. And it was the same throughout each and every one of the books, and it was the same here as well. But I love seeing where the characters ended up, and it was just a great conclusion to the series. In the end, I think I'll give Only Human 3.5 stars. Next book I read is Not Your Sidekick by C.B. Lee. So this was our Name of the Book Club book of the month. And Not Your Sidekick I have had on my shelves a long time. It's basically about a bisexual Chinese Vietnamese heroine who is struggling with not having superpowers like the rest of her family and the rest of the world around her. So this is a really short read, but it really does pack a punch, even though there are some parts that feel really predictable. I love how she's struggled with her marginalized identities. It's like, because she's biracial, you could feel the struggles that she had between the two parts as well. And I love how there was a really adorable romance as she gets to know another girl that she works with called Abby. And it was really cute just figuring out whether, you know, she was interested or not, whether she even swung that way, and that was the part of the book that I really liked. The superhero stuff, well, I could have given or taken it. It's basically set in a world where everyone's a meta-human, they get different classes, they have different classes of powers. Some people aren't meta-humans, and then there's the struggle between the good and the evil simply because they're given that task of being a villain or a superhero. So it was a really in-depth world as well when it comes to the superheroes, but I think I prefer Jessica's personal journey a lot more and wanted less of the cliche superhero stuff. So Not Your Sidekick, I did enjoy it. I found like the writing was a little bit awkward because it's set in third person perspective in past tense, but things are sort of happening as they go along. So it's kind of hard to get your head around in the start, but I got used to it as I went on with the books. This book has great diverse representation, but the thing that really held me back from loving it was the cliche, predictable parts of the story. So I gave Not Your Sidekick 3.5 stars. Next book is Brontide by Sue McPherson, and this is one of the books that I'm covering on OzYA on ABC Radio this month. And Brontide is a really unique book. As you can see, it's a super quick read. It's about an author called Sue, and it just so happens that the author of this book is called Sue McPherson, and she goes into a school and decides to interview some kids. And it was interesting seeing the perspective of 4 different kids and seeing, you know, just what their stories are, what their lives are like, how they interact with each other. There's a lot of diverse children between the ages of 17 and 12. So it was interesting getting to know their personalities. I found the language and the natural interview format between them to be really readable, and it felt really authentic. So much so that you're kind of guessing whether this interview is fact or fictional. After getting to the end of the book, I think it is fictional, but it was just really interesting seeing how these kids in a small town interact with each other, just their prejudices when it comes to each other, and the hobbies that they like to do as well. I found like it's a book that's really intriguing and it has a lot more depth than it appears to be at the surface, and I really enjoyed this one as well. It's a great Love Oz YA read that's written in such an engaging and interactive format, so I gave Brontide 3 stars. Next book is All of This Is True by Ligia de Penaflor. This book I was actually really disappointed with because from the blurb, from the way it looks and everything about it, it's basically about a group of friends who idolize this author, and she moves to their town and they ended up befriending her. But then the author ends up writing a story about them, and she's a best-selling author, and then she reveals all of her secrets, and it's basically their lives. I think the thing that got me about this book was I went in thinking it was going to be a psychological thriller, one with like this manipulative author who gets people to trust her. Well, it was about that. It's the gossipy nature about the book that really put me off. Basically about a lot of these teenagers, they really idolized this author and they made such a big deal about absolutely everything that they got to do, and it got so creepy at times. I mean, there was this point in time when the author befriends the boy as well and pushes him to get together with one of the other girls just so she could write about it and just so she could see how it all played out. And it's sort of written in past and parallels with snippets of her story, and you can see just how closely aligned they are. She pretty much just changed these teenagers' names. But yeah, as always, like, it was just a gossipy nature that really annoyed me. Some of the characters, like, I don't think any of them are likable in a sense, and I mean, that's not a bad thing, but it just didn't make me want to connect with them, and I didn't really care about them in the end. I think I ended up giving this 2 stars because you just had to suspend your disbelief so much, and yeah, it was just disappointing with the way it was executed. Next book that I read is The Tiger's Daughter by Kay Arsenault Rivera, and this is a book that I got out from the library. So I was really interested in reading this book because it's basically set in an Asian fantasy world between Mongolia and the China-Japan period. And it's basically about 2 Asian princesses. One is a Mongolian warrior and one is a princess who is also a warrior, basically. It's about them recounting their life together and as they get to know each other and the bond between each other, and one of them ends up becoming an empress. I love the relationship and just the ferocity of each and every character. They're not ashamed to be themselves, and one of them is just like a complete goddess. The thing that really put me off about this book, unfortunately, is the Asian representation. While reading it, I was actually really hurt by some of the Asian descriptions. In one point, one of the girls is referred to as being flat-faced, and at another point, basically an insult that's used is her squinty eyes were so small you could barely see if they were open or closed. So things like that, I just think it's a horrible way to describe a character, and I think more research should have been put in around that. It's not easy to see what is an Asian insult and what isn't. And I mean, why would you describe someone as being flat-faced? That's terrible. Like, I don't look in the mirror and go, hey, I'm flat-faced. So I found that really insulting because it wasn't own voices when it came to the Asian representation. It was own voices when it came to the lesbian representation. So, I mean, it's a bit problematic in a few senses. The other thing that I found harmful about the book is that it's set in such a generic Asian world that they kind of mishmash the East Asian worlds, and she kind of picks and chooses what she wants from Chinese and Japanese history, and you really can't mesh it because, you know, looking at the history of both of these places, the way that she refers to some of it just felt really ignorant and really like whitewashed in a sense, because basically China and Japan have tension still, even through because of the war that happened, and it's just the way that was described with some of it. It just felt really inauthentic, and Like, I really didn't like the way that it was told. I kind of wish it was a pure fantasy story. The story is also told in second person perspective. Basically, the girls are writing letters to each other after they've become grown women, and it's just a really awkward way to try and write a story and recount what's happened as well. So there were some parts I really enjoyed about the book. I enjoyed the story as a whole, but I really didn't like the representation, so I really can't give it more than 3 stars. The next one was a novella that I listened to via audiobook, and it's called Dusk or Dawn or Dark or Day by Shonen McGuire, who is definitely one of my favorite authors of all time. I will read anything that she writes, whether she writes under Myra Grant or Shonen McGuire. So it's actually a bit of a blur because I listened to this as an audiobook. It's a really short audiobook of only 7 hours. I knocked it over in about 2 days and I was working at the time, so some of it is a bit fuzzy. So basically the audiobook is about ghosts that come back that live in the human world, and they're trying to make up the depths that they left back in the human world. So one of the ghosts, she works in a call center helping suicidal teens and suicidal people, and it's a really interesting concept. There's a lot of cats. It's an interesting ghost story, but I felt like I didn't retain too much of it because it was in audiobook format, so I think I'll end up giving this one 3 stars. Next book is The Beast's Heart by Leif Shawcross, and this is another OzYA book for the month, which I'm talking about on ABC Radio. Oh my gosh, guys, I found The Beast's Heart to be so creepy. I love anything to do with Beauty and the Beast, especially when it's a retelling, and it's basically a story told from Beast's perspective, and it's also a debut book. But the thing I found problematic about it is that Beast sounds so freaking creepy in this book. It's pretty much like he dreamt about a beautiful girl accompanying him, and then he forces her dad to make her stay with him. It's like he does everything in his power to guilt her, to shame her, to force her to stay with her for, you know, a year, and he just overstepped the boundary in so many ways, and it was never addressed. I found the relationship between Beast and Isabel to be really problematic and really abusive. Like, at one point, he shovels food down her mouth because she's not wanting to eat, and she thanks him. Like, how freaking creepy is that? She asks to be alone at certain points because she wants to be away from the Beast, and he just rocks up, grabs her hand, and forces her to tell him why she's been so lonely and avoiding him. Okay, not only that, but he asks her to marry her over and over and over again, even though she says no, 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 and she keeps on rejecting him, but he still does it because he feels like he's obligated to, just so she can help him break the curse. Like, there's just a lot of toxic masculinity in this book that really rubbed me the wrong way. There's also Beast's favorite hobby is staring at a magical mirror that allows him to spy on Isabel's family and her 2 sisters, and that's basically the story. So he looks in his magical mirror, he's got a girl trapped in his castle, and yeah, it was just really disturbing. At one point, Isabel even undresses and he's watching her. Oh my gosh, guys. And she pretty much ends up with him because she feels sorry for him and because her family doesn't need her. Like, I just can't even go on about all the things that are wrong with this book. I do have a full review on Goodreads if you want to check it out as well. So The Beast's Heart, no thanks. 2 stars for me. So the last book I'm going to cover is Beach Planet Volume 1, and this is obviously a graphic novel. So I wanted to pick this up because I heard it was a really feminist read about female power and female sexuality. It made me really angry because it's basically where the females are in this really highly degraded situation. So there's a beach planet, which is like where women are jailed just for simply existing. There's a lot of female nudity and they're forced to do certain things. There's some really great prisoners, like it kind of reminds me of Orange is the New Black, but it was just really enraging seeing like a group of men being the security and spying on them and telling them what to do and what they couldn't do. And I prefer my feminist reads where the system isn't working against them this much. So yeah, Beach Planet I gave 2 stars too. So these are all the books that I read during June. I hope you enjoyed my thoughts on all of them, and if you did, please give me a thumbs up. Comment down below on your thoughts on these books as well. well and what you enjoyed about the video, and subscribe if you want to see more. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.